to another episode of The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters, and I will be your host once again for the next half hour where we're going to talk all things motorsports. And unfortunately, the motorsports world continues to grieve. It's been about a week now since we lost two-time Cup Series champion Kyle Busch, the all-time winningest driver across all three NASCAR series. It was undeniably one of the toughest weekends that NASCAR has had to endure in about 25 years. And unfortunately, it comes following the loss of another driver for Richard Childress Racing. Austin Hill stepped into Kyle Busch's car on Sunday and drove his newly renumbered 33 as best he could in honor of Kyle. Kyle was remembered across all of the races that happened this past week, and we are going to discuss all those races coming up here later on in the show. But right now, I'm going to do what Kyle would have wanted, which is to continue racing and to continue on. His memory will not be forgotten. His impact also will not be forgotten. But Kyle Busch, unfortunately, is no longer with us, and NASCAR, as well as the rest of the racing world, must now move on into a world without him. It's hard to get started on such a somber note like that, and I don't really know how else to do a transition from that into the news. But we do have news that we need to discuss, and we do have news that we need to cover. And like I said, Kyle would want us all to go on racing, and so I will go on telling you the news. We'll begin in the world of Formula One, where we got some very interesting news just this morning here on Wednesday that Alpine is set to become Gucci Racing Alpine beginning in 2027, as Gucci will replace outgoing sponsor BWT. The luxury brand signed the deal as a way to increase their audience share and reach new audiences through the world of Formula One. So we haven't seen a livery reveal yet, but we do know that it will be quite a different look for those Alpines beginning next year. Also in the world of Formula One, while it seemed like the recent vote to change F1's power unit regulations from a 50-50 split between battery and internal combustion engines to a 60-40 split of electric and internal combustion, that might have seemingly kept Max Verstappen in the series, as he was very happy to hear about these changes. However, he has now recently said that if these changes do not go through, he will quit. He just doesn't have it in him. And in fact, a quote from Verstappen over from this weekend said, quote, "If it stays like this, it's going to be a long year next year that I don't want. It's just not mentally doable for me if it stays like this. It's really not." Those are Max Verstappen's words when talking about the current power unit regulations in Formula One. And so if Formula One does indeed want to keep Verstappen, the four-time world champion, hopefully they will try and push through that 60-40 split and change for next year, because as we talked about last week, Verstappen might even have some hypercar interest in the WEC coming up here in the next couple of years, so it might not be a bad idea for Formula One and the FIA to kind of push that through. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton has once again denied reports that he is planning to retire, saying, quote, that he is planning, in fact, to be here for some time. He is still under contract with Ferrari through the 2027 season, but, of course, those rumors are coming along, and Lewis says, hey, you guys aren't retiring me. I'll decide when that happens, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. Finally, in Formula One news, this was very interesting. Now, I want you to keep take all of this with a grain of salt here, because there could be some merit to this. There could not be. I've struggled to find a really reputable source on this, so I'm reporting it more so because you're going to see it probably if you follow social media, and you might see it around there. But just remember to take this all with a grain of salt. Nothing's confirmed. The sources are not very great, but hey, it might be worth talking about. Rumors are currently circulating that Cadillac could replace Valtteri Bottas with Colton Herta as soon as the 2027 season, but again, that would require Herta to collect the necessary super license points necessary for him to move up to Formula One. Now, currently, Colton Herta has 35 of the required 40 super license points that he would need. Now, he would also then need to finish 8th or higher in this upcoming Formula 2 season. So during the current Formula 2 season, Herta's going to need to finish at least 8th in the championship in order to get that number of super license points. And currently, Herta sits 12th in the F2 championship. Now, he has scored a handful of points, but 12th to 8th is going to be a bit of a reach for Herta to get there. And so we'll see if that comes to fruition. Again, everything is dependent on Herta getting the required super license points, which he would only do if he finished at least 8th in the F2 championship this year. Moving on into the next piece of news in open-wheeled news, we had the Indianapolis 500 this past weekend, arguably one of the greatest races of all time. 70 official lead changes, the closest finish in the history of the race, closer than 82, closer than 92, closer than 06, closer than all of those, if you can believe it. One heck of an Indy 500. But we have some news to talk about that was announced this weekend. NTT has extended its title sponsor agreement with IndyCar and is also continuing as the official technology partner of the series and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, along with events at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's also important to note that it's not really been described how long this deal is for, but we do know that it is an extension for the Japanese telecommunications company that has served as the entitlement sponsor since 2019. Meanwhile, in the fallout from the Indianapolis 500, Alex Palou was penalized after failing post-race technical inspection following the Indianapolis 500 on Sunday. IndyCar said Palou's car was under the minimum front wing height, and Chip Ganassi Racing was fined $10,000 while Palou was docked 5 championship points. Now, here's the thing about this. You might recall that this was very similar to what got Callum Ilott disqualified last year following the Indianapolis 500 as well. Now, the IndyCar officiating board has found that, quote, the non-compliance was the result of an assembly error and not an intentional modification. So, because of that, that is their reasoning for why Palou was not disqualified and why he was able to keep his finishing position. Also, in the Indianapolis 500 news, Mick Schumacher was named Indy 500 Rookie of the Year after finishing 18th and being the only rookie to in the field to complete all 200 laps. Now, that's important for Dennis Hauger fans who are probably not too happy, considering the fact that Hauger was arguably much quicker than Schumacher, ran much better than Schumacher throughout the race, but Hauger had that pit road penalty during the race, and as a result, he finished the race 19th, one spot behind Schumacher, and also one lap down, whereas Schumacher finished on the lead lap. So it was very close. Also, I think Kyle Collette kind of got the raw end of the deal there. He did lead 9 laps before crashing at the very end of the race, under 10 laps to go. Very scary crash, but thankfully Collette was okay. But Collette had a very good starting spot until the penalty and ran relatively well throughout the race until the final crash. So, Rookie of the Year voting and decisions in for the Indianapolis 500 can be very controversial, I think, but we're not going to talk too much about why that's controversial. We're just going to congratulate Mick Schumacher on a job well done after his first month of May at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Finally, in the world of IndyCar news, Felix Rosenqvist, who did win the Indianapolis 500 by 0.02 tenth of a second over David Malukas, he's earned $4.34 million for winning the Indianapolis 500. That is the largest payout in the race's history. So big payday there for Felix Rosenqvist for finally getting it done and winning the Indianapolis 500. That is it for the open wheel news of the show. We're going to go ahead here and take our first break. But when we come back, we're going to discuss the news in the world of supercars as well as the world of NASCAR. So more Racing Report coming up after these messages. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. Appreciate you guys, as always, sticking with us through that break. Now let's go ahead and get into the world of supercars, because there's some news to discuss. First and foremost, this is very big for fans in Australia, as well as fans of a certain circuit that will be leaving the MotoGP calendar after this year. Supercars is reportedly targeting a return to Phillip Island next year as that track prepares to host its final MotoGP Grand Prix coming up here in October. Now, the track has not hosted a Supercars event since 2019, but could return as a 15th round and possible finals location. It is not expected currently to replace any existing round of the championship, so we could just get a complete schedule increase for Supercars next year with a return to Phillip Island. I think that would be ideal, not replacing any current track, which I think Supercars has a really good lineup right now of all the tracks that they're going to. Don't need to replace it for anything. No track right now needs to be replaced, nor should be replaced. But I do like the addition of Phillip Island back on the calendar, especially now that the track is going to lose the MotoGP Australian Grand Prix. Much needed for that track and great for Supercars. Meanwhile, we talked a little bit last week about the parity changes that have been made to the Chevrolet Camaro. Well, Supercars is apparently reportedly exploring additional parity adjustments ahead of next month's round at Darwin. So as we get more details on that, we'll be sure to bring it to you right here on the Racing Report. And on that note, let's go ahead now and talk about NASCAR news. And like I said at the top of the show, it's been a very difficult week for NASCAR. Losing Kyle Busch has been arguably one of the hardest things for not just myself, but a lot of NASCAR fans to deal with, and NASCAR in general to deal with. And I just don't feel right talking about this, talking about Kyle that way, Kyle's death. I would prefer to talk about Kyle for what he did on the track and not necessarily what happened in his final days. I just don't feel it is appropriate. If you want to learn what happened in his final days, that is your prerogative. It is totally fine with me. You're not going to make me upset. You're not going to make anybody else upset. It's perfectly okay to be curious about that, but it's also perfectly okay to grieve. It's also perfectly okay to grieve somebody that you might not have ever known personally or even only met once or twice throughout your life. It's completely okay to grieve. And on that note, because of that, I don't really feel like it's necessary to talk about where Richard Childress goes from here. We know that Austin Hill is going to be in the number 33, which has now been renumbered from 8 to 33 this weekend at Nashville. It's TBD who races that car at Michigan and in the races beyond that. But really, let's talk about some good news. Let's talk about some happier news in the world of NASCAR, because believe me, I think we all need it right now. And first and foremost, let's talk about some of the happier news. As Daytona International Speedway and Musco will install LED lighting across all existing oval track high-mast pole-mounted fixtures, as well as the infield road course, the infield itself, pit boxes, and emergency lighting systems. The project will also feature LED RGB accent lighting on track light poles synchronized with the caution light system. So if you're familiar with how Texas Motor Speedway's caution lights are on the catch fencing, it'll be very similar now coming up here at Daytona, as well as uplighting for the upper level underside of the grandstand seating, which I think will be kind of interesting to look at. And that is expected to create a visually engaging moments throughout race events. So big changes coming to the Daytona International Speedway's lighting system. Be very curious to see what that looks like coming up here, if it's done by the time they get to NASCAR returns there in August. Meanwhile, the damaged vehicle policy for the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series and the Craftsman Truck Series have been changed to now allow teams whose cars are towed back to the garage the chance to make repairs rather than considering them being retired from the race. Additionally, NASCAR has also eliminated the practice time penalties for the Truck Series teams that fail any inspections. So those are some changes that have been enacted. They were enacted last week, but unfortunately they weren't announced until after we'd already recorded that week's episode of the Racing Report. Beard Motorsports is going to enter Casey Mears at this upcoming race in Pocono in a couple of weeks' time to help Mears achieve 500 career Cup starts. Now, if we talked about this a couple of months ago, and we also discussed it when Mears failed to qualify for the race at Talladega because qualifying was rained out. So now they will attempt again to get Mears that 500th career start, and they will go to Pocono instead to make up for that Talladega DNQ. Carson Ferguson will drive Colleague Racing's free agent truck this weekend at Nashville Superspeedway. Lots of truck announcements coming up this weekend, including Stephen Parsons, who will drive the number 4 Chevrolet for Nice Motorsports, also in the truck race this weekend at Nashville. Again, another Truck Series driver announcement, and that's going to be Parker Retzlaff. He's going to return to the Truck Series this weekend, also at Nashville, driving the number 62 truck for Halmar Friesen Racing. And that's also in conjunction with the Legacy Motor Club, which has led some people to connect some dots. But again, as we talked about last week, it's fairly well assumed that Riley Herbst will be taking over that third car, at Legacy Motor Club. Maybe people are looking into it a little bit too hard on Parker Retzlaff, but maybe he could be joining some sort of a Toyota fold in the near future, just probably not in the Cup Series. Meanwhile, Cletus McFarlane, who is also driving in this week's O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at Nashville for Richard Childress Racing, he's going to return to the Truck Series in 2 weeks' time at Michigan, driving the number 4 truck for Nice Motorsports. Also returning this weekend in the Truck Series is going to be Daniel Dye. He's going to race that McAnally-Hilgeman kind of R&D/rookie car that Tony Breidinger was racing in not long ago. He's going to race 4 upcoming races, starting this weekend at Nashville. Then he's going to be at Michigan, and then again at Kansas and Charlotte later on this year. So that is it for the NASCAR news. Again, like I said, I have kept it fairly brief, trying not to open wounds right now to talk about Kyle Busch, as I know we're all continue to mourn. We all continue to grieve. And again, I want to remind everybody watching this show that is mourning and is grieving that it is okay. There is no right way to mourn or grieve somebody's loss that you might not have known personally and just watched on TV every Sunday, Saturday, Friday, whenever. It's okay. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through this together. And just remember that we race the way just like Kyle would have wanted. Kyle would have wanted us to race, so we will race, and we will race hard just like him. We're going to go ahead here and take our second break of the show, but when we come back, we're going to recap still what I think is considered the greatest weekend in racing, even though the Canadian Grand Prix had some significant overlap with the Indy 500 and the Coca-Cola 600, making it kind of difficult for race fans to watch all 3 races. But either way, we're going to talk about them, so you won't want to miss a single moment of that. More Racing Report coming up after these. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. Thanks again so much for sticking with us through that break. Let's go ahead and quickly recap the weekend of racing because there was no shortage of it. Got to talk about all of it. In the Indianapolis 500, it was Felix Rosenqvist beating David Malukas at the stripe in the closest finish in Indy history. A thriller of all Indy 500s, probably one of the best 500s in recent memory. In all honesty, I used to think that 2013 was one of the best Indy 500s. I've also had 2017 up there as one of the greats. But man, 2026 is also going to go down in history as one of the greatest. And I think a lot of that played into because of the conditions. It was a little bit cooler, had some rain sprinkles in here and there. And it made for the track temperature to cool down a little bit, which made for a lot more grip. And that's what I think you saw Felix Rosenqvist take advantage of during that whole last lap, which, by the way, the whole last 10 laps of the Indy 500 were incredible. And a lot of it was, of course, caused by the restart from Kyle Collette's crash with about 8 laps to go. And then we restarted with about 4 laps to go, and then they threw a caution for Mick Schumacher just brushing the wall in turn 1, re-racked them all again for a 1-lap shootout, which, boy, I don't know how I feel about some of these 1-lap shootouts in the Indy 500, but you can't deny that it's some exciting racing. But of course, you saw the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat with Rosenqvist and Malukas. And also, I just want to say something real quick to everybody who commented negatively on my article this weekend about David Malukas specifically and asking why is he crying. I'm gonna go ahead and refer you to an Al Unser Jr. quote from 1992, which previously was the closest finish in Indianapolis 500 history, and say, you just don't know what Indy means. Of course David Malukas is crying. He should be crying. Indy means that much. If you're not crying after finishing second, did you even really want to win the 500? What were you doing there? If you're not crying after finishing second in the Indy 500, after that close of a finish in the Indy 500, mind you, what are you even doing? You should be that emotional. That's what Indy means. So to everybody out there who was commenting on my article this weekend and being like, why is David Malukas crying? Why is he such a crybaby? Oh, why, blah, blah. You don't understand. You clearly don't know what Indy means, and you're just making yourself look silly in front of all these people. Knock it off, guys. Knock it off. Malukas drove one heck of a race. Probably coulda, shoulda, woulda won that race. But in all honesty, he said it after the race, going back and looking at it, nothing else he could have done. Rosenqvist just got an incredible run coming off of turn 4. Malukas tried to defend as best he could, tried to utilize the Dragon. Unfortunately, the Dragon only works in some cases when the driver behind you doesn't have a massive run on you. I'm still surprised he was able to go side by side with his teammate for that long. Like that to me, I genuinely thought when that last lap happened, watching Rosenqvist, I was like, no, they're letting Malukas get away. You can't fight side by side and then still win this race. They fought side by side for 4 corners, and Rosenqvist still came out and won the race. I hate it for Marcus Armstrong, though. Definitely could have vaulted himself into history as somebody who finished high in the 500. Not to say that he didn't. He still finished in the top 5. But still, if he would have been in there, I think it would have been a big deal for him and his career. But either way, just another classic Indianapolis 500. And, boy, I can't wait for next year now. We got the new logo, by the way, for the Indy 500. Much better than previous years. Looks like we're finally getting away from that kind of cookie-cutter style of logo. Very excited to see that. But now let's talk about some of the NASCAR races that were in Charlotte this weekend. Just in general, a dreary weekend that I think everybody wanted to get done with and over with. Rain all week, basically. Postponed the truck race on Friday. Forced the truck race to run Sunday morning, and then Fox cut it off so that it wouldn't interfere with the Indianapolis 500 coverage. But Lane Riggs did win that race. It was very short, relatively short, and like I said, just one of those things that I think everybody was just trying to get over with. And another race that I think everybody was trying to get over with was that O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race that got off to a relatively good start on Saturday, but then got rain delayed and continuously delayed. And then finally they got it to a point where they could maybe restart this, but then ultimately ended up just running a bunch of caution laps in order to get to the end of stage 2 so that they could actually call the race official. Because to be honest with you, where were they going to move it? They weren't gonna. They didn't have any time on Saturday to run it because you're not going to run the race up against the Indianapolis 500. That's rating suicide. Let's be real. You're not going to do that. And then second of all, you're really going to make them wait until Monday to run the race when everybody else is already probably trying to just get out of there and get to the next weekend because of everything that happened this past weekend. NASCAR fans are going to be mad because of the way these races ended, but I don't think that they need to be. I think they need to just be understanding that logistically speaking, this was the best. This was the best that NASCAR could do given those circumstances. But in the Coca-Cola 600, a fitting way for Daniel Suarez to score his second career Cup Series victory, third career Cup Series victory, driving the Spire Motorsports number 7 in honor of Kyle Busch. We had a former Kyle Busch Motorsports driver driving the same car number that Kyle won with just last week at Dover, just in his last ever race, won his last race with. And then for the team that bought the assets of Kyle Busch Motorsports, you couldn't script it any better. And for Daniel Suarez, you have to understand how much that probably meant to him. Because be honest with you, Kyle Busch, looking at some of those pictures this weekend of how many drivers that are current Cup drivers that came up through Kyle Busch Motorsports, I mean, it's a quarter of the field. That's a lot. And so for Daniel Suarez to win that race, it was a very special. And of course, let's not forget how special it was for him to have his family there, who lives in Charlotte, doesn't really get to go to a lot of the races. Just a huge deal. Huge deal for Suarez to get that victory. Congratulations to him. We've got to run through some of the other races real quick because we're running out of time. The Canadian Grand Prix, the sprint race was won by George Russell. The actual Grand Prix was won by Kimi Antonelli. Antonelli quickly looking like he might be the title favorite. George Russell even going on as far to say that it might be Antonelli's title to lose. Supercars was in Tasmania this past weekend. Chaz Mostert won race 1. Andre Heimgartner got his third career Supercars victory in race 2, followed by Brock Feeney getting it done in race 3. Super Formula was out in Suzuka this weekend. Race 1 was won by Sasha Fenestraz, and race 2 was won by Nerei Fukuzumi, and the Little 500 in Anderson was won by Cody Swanson, and that is his 4th Little 500 victory of his career. Now let's take a quick look here, coming up at some of the races that are scheduled for this weekend. We've got NASCAR, a full slate of NASCAR in Nashville. Truck race is coming up Friday at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. That's going to be on FS1. The O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race is going to be at 7:30 p.m. That's going to be on the CW, followed by the Cup race on Sunday. That's going to be at 3 o'clock Eastern on Prime. So night races for trucks and O'Reilly, but a day race, an afternoon race for the Cup Series coming up here on Sunday. IndyCar is in Detroit, coming off the Indianapolis 500. The Indy Next races Sunday at 10:30 a.m. That'll be on FS1. That is, again, also Eastern Time. Followed by the IndyCar Detroit Grand Prix coming up Sunday at 12:30 p.m. That's on Fox. IMSA is also in Detroit. They're going to race Saturday at 4 o'clock. That'll be live on NBC. So lots of you should be able to watch a lot of races for free this weekend, which will be nice. MotoGP is going to be in Mugello. The sprint race is scheduled for Saturday at 8:55 a.m. That'll be on FS2. Again, that's Eastern Time. The actual Grand Prix is going to be Sunday at 7 a.m. Eastern on FS1. The High Limit Sprint Car Series has a couple of races this weekend. First and foremost, they're going to go to Lawrenceburg here at Indiana coming up here on Friday. That race is scheduled to begin the broadcast at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday. That'll be on Flow Sports. And then again, they'll go up to Quincy, Michigan, which is, I don't know. It'll be a drive from Lawrenceburg, to say the least. But they're going to be in Quincy, Michigan at Butler Motor Speedway coming up Saturday at 6 o'clock p.m. on Flow Racing. And then the Cars Tour is racing at Langley Speedway Saturday at 6 p.m. on Flow Racing. That is it for this week's episode of The Racing Report. Thank you again so much for listening and watching. Remember, there is no right way to grieve. It will all be okay. Feel free to talk to me if you ever want to. My Twitter handle is right down there below. Feel free to let me know whenever you want. So for WTHR, my name is Rob Peeters, and this has been another episode of The Racing Report.